Hello, this is Patrick at OneCNC West, and what we're going to do in this training video is create this solid model using OneCNC Mill Professional. Now, typically when you create a solid model, you're going to need to start with wireframe geometry. To help us with this, I've created an additional layer called Dimensions. If I turn this layer on and hit the spacebar twice to go to a CAD view, you'll notice we have all the dimensions to help us create this geometry. All right, let's get started. Looking at the geometry, we really should create the boundary for the main body first. If we take a close look at the dimensions, we can see that this body or profile is actually symmetrical. So all the elements we see here in this corner is going to apply on all four corners. So all we really need to do is create one corner, and then we can mirror that to quickly create the boundary geometry. Let's take a look at what we need. We can begin by creating a line that starts at x0, y0, comes down to y minus 800 thousandths, and then moves to y minus 1.125, x 250 thousandths. I'm going to turn the dimensions layer off. We're going to be using a separate layer called Layer 1. Let's head over here to the Command Manager, select our Line tool, and we can type in the coordinates for x0, y0, z0, but it's much faster just to take your cursor and snap or left-click the origin. Now, you'll know you're at the origin when the cursor displays a little green square. I'm going to left-click, and now I'm going to come over into the coordinate input area, and I'm going to say that I want this line to stop at y minus 800 thousandths. That looks good. Now I'm just going to hit the Enter key again, and now I want the line to go to x of 250 thousandths, y minus 1.125. I think that looks good, so we can hit the Enter key just a couple times and then click OK. Once we're done, we can hit the Escape key on the keyboard. So there's really all the geometry we need to start to create the boundary. Let's make sure this matches up with our dimensions. I'm going to come over here to the Layer Browser, and I'm going to turn the Dimensions layer on by just left-clicking. And it looks like we're right on track. Now, if we take a look at the length and width of the part, we can see the part's actually 5 inches in length, and it has a width of 3 inches. So if we're going to mirror this, we need to create some simple mirror lines. We can do that just by going into our Line tool, and if I'm going to mirror this along the x-axis, we know the part's 5 inches long. So if I create a vertical line at x 2.5, and I'm just looking over here in the coordinate input to make sure I'm at x 2.5, I'm going to left click, move my cursor down and left click, and when I'm done, I can right hand mouse click. Let's create another line so we can mirror the geometry along the y-axis. So again, I'm going to look within the coordinate input area to make sure that I'm at the proper y value. So to create the brand new line, I'm going to move the cursor down to y minus 1.5. I'm going to left click, move to the right, and left click, and when I'm done, I can right hand mouse click. So all we've done here is we've just created some simple lines that we can use as mirror lines to mirror the geometry. Let's go ahead and mirror the geometry now. The first thing we need to do is to select the geometry, and the quickest way to do that is just hit the letter S on the keyboard. Once I hit the letter S, I can left click and left click. Once the geometry is selected, I can right hand mouse click. Now let's use our mirror tool. I'm going to select mirror from the top menu, and I want to make sure that under parameters, copy is selected. All we have to do now is select the mirror line. Let's start with the mirror line so we can mirror things along the x-axis. I'm just going to left click, and when I'm done, I can right hand mouse click. Hey, that looks great. Now let's select the additional geometry by hitting the letter S on the keyboard, left click, and then when we're finished selecting, we can right hand mouse click. With the geometry selected, we'll go back into the mirror command, and it's exactly the same process. But this time, instead of selecting this mirror line, we're going to select this mirror line with just a left click and a left click. And when we're done, we can right hand mouse click. Now, to deselect geometry, you can head up to the top toolbar and select this option. It's called Deselect All Selected Entities. And once you click that, the geometry will become unselected. Now let's delete both of our mirror lines. I'll hit the letter S on the keyboard, left click, left click, and when I'm finished, I can hit the delete key on the keyboard. Now let's connect our geometry by creating additional lines. We'll head back into the Command Manager, select our line tools. I'm going to take our cursor and simply just left click and left click. Now with that line created, I can right-hand mouse click. That tells OneCNC that I'm done creating that line, and we can start the process again. Simply left click, right click, left click, right click, left click, and when we're finished, we can right-hand mouse click. I'm going to hit the escape key on the keyboard, and let's again check our geometry against our dimension layer. Let's head down to the layer browser and let's turn on our dimensions layer. And as I turn that on and off, you can see that everything's looking good. Now let's create these fillets, these 250 thousandths fillets. Looks like that's going to be typical 8 places. We can easily do that by heading over into the Command Manager, select our circle tools, use fillet, and make sure that the fillet radius is set to 250 thousandths. So we'll take our cursor and simply just left click the lines where we'd like to create the fillets. It's just a matter of left click, left click, left click, left click, left click, and just repeat the process until you're finished. I think that looks good. Now let's create the holes along the corners of our boundary. Let's check our dimension layer, and it looks like these holes have a diameter of 250 thousandths. So let's turn our dimension layer off, head back into the Command Manager. With our circle tool, we'll make sure the diameter is set to 250 thousandths. That looks good. Now we can easily snap the arc center just by taking your cursor and wait till you see that little diamond. When the cursor displays a diamond, that means you're at the arc center. So we're going to left click, left click, left click, left click, and when finished, click the right-hand mouse button. Now, the next type of geometry that we're going to create is going to be geometry that's going to help us shape the solid model. In fact, we're going to be using this geometry to cut into the solid model, much like a cookie cutter. So let me turn on the dimensions layer and let's take a look at those shapes. If we take a look at this arch right here, we're definitely going to need to create this geometry to help us cut into the solid model. Same with this arch. We're going to need to create that geometry again to help us cut in or cut through the solid model. So let's start by creating this arc right here. If we take a look, this arc has a radius of 1 inch 100 thousandths. So let's create that. Let's turn our dimension layer off, head back into the Command Manager, select our circle tool. We're going to give this a diameter of 2.2. Now, having said that, remember that our radius was 1.1. You could type in 1.1, use the asterisk as the multiplication symbol, 2, and then hit the equal sign on the keyboard, and that would give you the diameter. So anytime you have numeric input within OneCNC, you can always type in a formula and then hit the equal sign on the keyboard to solve that formula. All right, so the diameter is going to be 2 inches, 200 thousandths, and this is going to be placed at x 2.5, and the y value is going to be minus 2.2. With the coordinates entered, we can now click OK, and then hit Escape on the keyboard. We can quickly check our geometry against the dimensions layer, and all that looks very good. Let's create this next arc. This has a radius of 1 inch 900 thousandths. So the diameter is going to be 3 inches 800 thousandths. Let's turn our dimension layer off. Let's head back over into the Command Manager. Select the circle command. Let's change the diameter to 3 inches 800 thousandths. Now we can take our cursor and simply snap the arc center. Remember, when the cursor displays a little diamond, that means you're at the arc center. So we can left click, and when we're finished, we can right-hand mouse click. All right, now these shapes look good, but if we take a closer look at the dimensions layer, these all have vertical lines attached to them. So let's create that. Let's head back into the Command Manager. This time we're going to use our line tools. And all I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to take my cursor and I'm going to wait till I snap right at the quadrant. Now OneCNC will verify that you're at the quadrant by flashing a little symbol. In this case, it's a little square. So I can left click, pull straight down, and this dimension doesn't have to be critical. I just have to go past that horizontal edge of the boundary. I'm going to left click, Now I'm going to move to the left. I'm going to left click and I'm done with that. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to create this vertical line over on the other side. There's the little symbol telling me that I'm at the quadrant. So I'm going to left click, pull straight down, and when I'm done, right hand mouse click. Let's do the same for the larger diameter circle. Wait till we're at the quadrant. We're going to left click, pull straight down, left click, come over to the left click. When we're done with that line, we're going to right click. Same process. Grab the boundary with the left click, pull straight down, left click, and when you're done, right hand mouse click. Now we can use the trim tool. In fact, we're going to be using trim 2. A shortcut is hit Control T on the keyboard. That puts you into the trim 2 command. When using trim 2, all you need to do is select the geometry that you'd like to keep. So we're going to left click and left click, left click, left click, left click, and left click. Let's do the same to the larger shape. We're going to left click, left click, left click, left click, left click, and left click. And you'll notice that the end result are 2 closed boundaries, and a closed boundary is exactly what you need if you want to use that geometry to cut into a solid model. Let's check this against our dimensions layer. Let's turn our dimensions layer on and off, back on and off again, and I think all that looks very good. Now that we have our wireframe geometry created, we can start to create our solid model. So let's do this. Let's turn our dimension layer on, and let's see how far we need to extrude the geometry. It looks like the thickness of the part is 875 thousandths. Let's turn our dimension layer off. Let's head back into the command manager, and we're going to select our extrude tools. From there, we're going to use extrude curves. Simply take your cursor and just left click anywhere on that outside boundary. Once you've done selecting the geometry, right hand mouse click. You can now take your cursor and move it up and down to extrude in any direction. You can also type in a height over here on the left. Now I'm just going to take my cursor and pull it down till I come to right at minus 875 thousandths. That looks great, so I'm going to left hand mouse click, and when we're done, we can right click. And there we go. There's our very first solid model. Now let's take a look at using this closed boundary to cut into the solid model. I'm going to hit the spacebar twice to quickly go into our CAD view. Let's turn our dimension layer on, and let's see how deep we need to extrude cut into the solid model. It looks like we need to extrude cut 750 thousandths with a taper of 10 degrees. So let's do that. All right, so let's turn our dimension layer off. That looks good. Let's head back over into the command manager. We're going to use our extrude cut command this time. And for the taper angle, we're going to type in 10 degrees. We can now take our cursor anywhere on that boundary we created for our cutout, just left click. And again, we can type in a value or move our cursor to define the direction of the cut. I'm going to pull the cursor down to right at minus 750 thousandths and left hand mouse click. And when we're done, we can right click. All right, I think this is looking great. I'm going to hit the spacebar twice again to quickly go to a CAD view. Let's turn our dimension layer back on, and let's take a look at the next detail we need to create. Notice that the very floor of the pocket isn't flat. It looks like it has a taper of 5 degrees. So what we're going to do now is take a look at some techniques to help us create that tapered floor. To accomplish this, we're going to create additional solid models, and then we're going to use the OneCNC union command to join all those solid models together into a single solid model. Before we do this, let's turn off the dimension layer. I'm now going to pan the view just a little bit, and let's rotate the view as well. We're going to be utilizing a new construction plane to help create our geometry. So the first step is to create a point where I can locate the construction plane. I'm going to head over to the command manager, and using our extract and edge tool, I'm going to take my cursor and just left click right on that edge of the solid model. And what that does is that creates a line. Now let's use the point tool. I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to snap the very center of the line. Now you'll know you're at the center when the cursor displays a little triangle. I'm going to left click and then right hand mouse click. Now again, I created that point just to help us locate the brand new construction plane we're going to create. Let's head down to the lower left corner and select our construction plane tools. Within our construction plane tools, let's use this option to create a construction plane from a face of the solid model. All we need to do is take our cursor and just left click on the face, and OneCNC creates the construction plane. Now I want to move that construction plane to where we created that point. So we're going to use the very first option, where we can take our cursor and snap a point, and that will locate the construction plane. Very good. Now I'm going to move the construction plane tools off to the side for just a little bit, and now I'm going to hit the spacebar twice to go into a CAD view, and this time it's really important to note that what we want to do is select the plane option. That's going to align our view so that we're looking normal to the construction plane. Alright, now let's create the geometry for the taper on the floor of the pocket. Let's head over to the command manager, let's go into our line tools, and we're going to start the line right at that point we created. I'm just going to left click. Now the floor taper has an angle of 5 degrees, and that means for us we can come over here to where it says line angle and type in 175 degrees. That will give us that 5-degree angle. I'm going to take our cursor right about to where the fillet begins and left click. I'm going to pull down straight and left click. I'm going to pull over to the right, and I want to wait right till I get the edge there. Now if you can't see it, you can always zoom in and just click right at the edge and then left click. And when you're done, you can right hand mouse click. And what that's done is that has created a closed boundary that represents the shape of the tapered floor of the pocket. Now let's use our extrude tools to extrude out some shapes. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more. Let's head over to the command manager, select our extrude tools, and from there we're going to use extrude curves. I'm going to take my cursor, I'm going to left click that boundary we just created, right click, and then I'm going to move my mouse to the right. And if I have a little trouble deciding where I want to stop the extrusion, I can rotate, and then all I want to do is make sure I go past the boundary of that cutout that we made. Right about there is great, so I'm going to left click. Now let's create another solid model. Same technique, we're going to left click the boundary, right click, we're going to pull the boundary right till we pass the end of the pocket cutout, right about there, and left click, and when we're done we can right hand mouse click. Now we no longer need to use the new construction plane, so let's go back to our original default XY default plane, and we can now close down our construction plane tools. We now have 3 individual solid models. I'm going to hit the letter S on the keyboard. I can left click, there's one solid, left click, there's the second solid, and left click, there's the original solid model we've been working on. With all 3 solid models selected, we're going to head over to the command manager. We're going to select our model operations tool and select union. So what the union command does is it takes all 3 solid models and it unions them together into one solid model. Now you can verify this by taking your cursor into the lower right hand corner, open up your verify tools, and from there select the option called retrieve information about a solid model. Take your cursor and just hover over the solid, and you'll notice now that it says verified selected is a solid. And also note that the region information says region 1. That's extremely important as it signifies one solid model. All right, very good. Now let's hit the spacebar twice on the keyboard to go to a CAD view. Let's turn our dimension layer back on. And let's take a look at the fillet. It looks like there's 125 thousandths fillet at the top of the cutout and at the base of the pocket. So let's create those now. Let's turn the dimension layers off. Let's go back into the command manager. We're going to select our model tools and select fillet. Within the fillet dialog box, we want to make sure that we have standard fillet selected. And down here where it says radius, we're going to type in 125 thousandths. That looks great, so we'll click OK to that. Now we're going to left click that top edge and left click the bottom edge, and then we can right hand mouse click and let OneCNC create the fillets. Now let's create the holes. Let's go back into the Command Manager, back into our Extrude tools, and now we're going to use Extrude Cut. Going to take our cursor, left click the circle. We don't need a taper, so I'm going to type in 0 for that. Take my cursor, just pull it straight down and left click. Left click, pull the cursor straight down and left click. Left click, pull the cursor straight down and left click. Left click, pull the cursor straight down and left click. Now, if we take a look at our dimensions layer, it looks like there's a chamfer we need to create on all 4 holes. Let's turn our dimension layer off, turn our other layer back on, and let's create those chamfers. Back into the Command Manager, we're going to reselect our solid tools, back into the fillet command, chamfer, and let's set that to 20 thousandths. That looks great. We'll click OK to that. And all I'm going to do now is just left click the edges at the very top of all 4 of the holes. When that's completed, we can right hand mouse click. All right, that's looking great. Now, we don't need any of that wireframe geometry. So what we can do is head up to the top toolbar, use our select by color command, select all the dark blue geometry, click OK, and then hit the delete key on the keyboard. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.